Alright, let's
Come
get
on,
We're gonna
started.
get canceled real quick.
Oh my god.
Timing is that. That was
Unlike some of its peers, The
Okay.
Forest, the survival
I
horror
see.
game from Canadian-based studio End Night Games, delivered on not just the popular gather and craft survival game format, but also added a surprisingly complex and equally bananas story featuring cannibals and mutants. With the immediate arrival of its long-awaited sequel, Sons of the Forest, comes not only the pressure to top the beloved experience of the original, but also to add some new and increasingly wild surprises. And based on
that
the
looks
5
like
hours that I've played
morning,
so
dude.
far, I'm not only excited about the sequel's potential, but also
Okay.
confident
Look
that
at the
End Night
graphics,
could revolutionize the survival genre.
Eric, I don't think our PCs can handle that.
Dude, what do you mean handles Black Ops 3 pretty fine?
Yeah, Martin. All you gotta
The
do
forest
is just,
begins with a simple premise.
Yeah, Martin,
You've
all you gotta
crash
do is
landed
just
on a
vote on his
mysterious peninsula and begin your quest to survive at all costs. There was also the optional
Hey,
objective
but
of finding
forest.
your kidnapped son, a task that would take you down a wild and disturbing narrative rabbit hole populated by flesh-hungry
Daddy's
mutants.
dead.
Sons of the Forest
Oh.
largely shares the same
That's right.
setup, substituting
like
your son for a missing billionaire. It's a basic idea, but one that allows you to jump straight into the action, allowing players who have no intention of
Oh,
progressing
shoot.
the rescue mission to solely focus on building their very own lakeside
See, now
resort
that's
with some
Sons
friends
of the
right away.
Forest.
Just like its predecessor, you can
Dude,
play,
that looks
build, and
so
cause
good.
chaos with 7 of your friends in co-op. But you can
Oh,
still see
7.
everything Sons of the Forest has to offer.
You can get David and Chris
The big
on there.
difference this time, though, is that even when you play solo,
Already
you're not
better
alone.
than PS4.
Enter Calvin.
Bro, be right back.
At the very start of Sons of the Forest,
Yeah,
you're
that's
introduced
correct.
to Calvin, an elite soldier who not only survived the helicopter crash that stranded you on the island, but is also very much along for the survival ride as an AI companion. While Calvin has suffered some major head trauma that's left him unable to speak, his injuries have not, perhaps surprisingly, prevented him from being extremely helpful. In an apparent effort to replicate the multiplayer experience for solo players, Calvin will follow you around and respond to commands issued via a bunch of handy quick select
Oh, that's
options.
cool. I don't have to play with you
He'll
guys.
take orders to
That's
do
it.
less than desirable busy work, such as chopping down trees and gathering logs.
Bruh, these NPCs are more useful than you guys.
During
All
my
I'm saying is I'm
hands-on,
playing
the value
solo.
of having an
Eric,
AI companion
shut
was
up.
immensely noticeable. There was a huge benefit
Eric,
to sending
yeah,
Calvin
the
off to find
NPC.
resources, while my co-op partner
That
and I
brand
focused on
is
designing
more of
our
an
structure.
NPC
I'd regularly
than
turn around
the
to find a
NPC.
fresh pile of logs for our disposal, with Calvin already on his merry way to collect more. Not only will Calvin somewhat provide company for solo players, but he offers helpful, time-saving resources even when in a group, putting a significant dent
Oh,
in
he has
the
better
they
than
got
aim
better
than
aim
you.
than Centric.
This affords more time to either sculpt a masterpiece
Oh, I think
or
he
plow
died.
forward on the cannibal killing quest. Calvin has a mind of his own though, well, at least to some degree. He sits down to rest when he gets tired and seeks water when he's thirsty. He'll also become upset if you treat him poorly, which makes him less productive and thus decreases the value as a companion. And if you decide you're not interested in having a worker bee along for the ride, you have the option to disable Calvin in the most realistic way possible. Shoot him in the head and you'll remove him from your session.
No
You're
way.
limited to
God.
1 Calvin per multiplayer session, so the dream of a legion of Calvins can't be fulfilled.
You guys
The
better not
developers
kill our
assure you
Calvin.
that
Can
the
we?
companions can find as you progress,
Kenny's
each with
probably
their
gonna kill
own
him.
unique AI. During my playthrough,
I'll have him
I caught a
fishing
glimpse of
only.
Virginia,
Screw
a
you
mutant
guys.
with
I don't
3
trust
arms
you.
and 3 legs. She quickly scampered once I approached her.
Okay,
and definitely
yep,
had
that's
more of
her.
a skittish sensibility than
Alright, we're
Calvin.
gonna go
But
get
the
her.
developers told me that she can eventually be recruited and will become attached to you over time should you be kind to her. They compared
shall
her
be our
instincts to
queen.
that of an elusive and independent cat, which stands in opposition to Calvin's
No,
level
she's
of
only a
She's
shotgun
fake.
and a
Shotgun with
pistol.
the AI improvements aren't limited to just companions though. On our expedition we came across several groups of enemies, ranging from a cluster of cannibals to a mob of monstrosities, each demonstrating their own impressive decision-making abilities. It felt like my enemies were thinking and making active decisions based on not only my actions, but also their situations and environment. Particularly in
Yeah, but
first-person
it's
horror
all-
games, enemies generally have 2 modes of behavior: patrol and attack.
That's a bunch of
But in Sons of the
monkeys.
Forest, some foes would just be extremely wary and just interested in watching what I do, while others would charge in aggressively, only to back down when things didn't go their way. I saw enemies consoling their fallen friends, changing their clothes depending on the weather conditions, and even trying to destroy my newly erected home when my back was turned. It was clear to see that the enemy's brains were not only following coded rules, but also adapting their thoughts based on the external influences. The developers explained to me that certain enemies with leadership qualities can influence the decisions of others, and even promote ideas in their ranks such as religion, and that each individual has their own tastes, desires,
Yo,
and
we can bring
proclivities.
Christianity into this.
My dude brought the Glock.
From my small taste of Sons of the Forest, I didn't really
Look
get
at
a
the
sense of
butterfly.
how deep
Butterfly on
the
the
system
axe?
is and how much it'll affect your experience. But the teasers I saw filled
Okay,
my
guys,
mind
I'm
with
back. What
dozens of
happened?
possibilities. I saw enemies adapting to changing their ecosystem and weather conditions, which now cycle through
called by
seasons
my
that
mom.
change as you progress.
That's
I
probably
even
because
accidentally
secret.
triggered a
Somebody
war
shut
after
up.
I stupidly opened the entrance to the game's complex
I accidentally
underground cave
triggered a
network
war.
and released a faction of mutants into the domain of another tribe. My simple decision caused their living space to change and encouraging them to adjust their focus. And after that little taste of chaos, I can't wait to see how flexible this system can be. As you'd expect, the titular forest makes a return, and it looks better than ever. From the complex density of foliage, to the gorgeous rainfall and beautifully lit cave stalactites amongst the hanging corpses and mutant fetuses, the graphical power on show here
Baby.
rivals the majority of AAA releases. It was a joy
The
to
baby.
explore without even the slightest hint of repetition in its design. With a tease of bunkers, villages, and God knows what else in a world that's promised to be 4 times larger than the original, I can easily see myself getting lost
Not
and
sick.
then sidetracked in the wilderness for hours on end. But at its core, Sons of the Forest is a survival game, and so when you're not exploring, there's a good chance you're building. The construction tools have been
mom's a survival
significantly
game.
overhauled for the sequel. Gone are the floating blue ghost building blocks, replaced by user-friendly,
Fortnite?
realistic presentation of wilderness carpentry. Instructions
Fortnite?
are more literal, and actions are contextual. Instead of just loading resources into a ghost version of the final product,
Okay, that
you're
looks
now free
clean.
to, with magnetic and snapping assistance, manually place logs
I mean, what?
and sticks in the direction that you'd like.
That's what
allowing
I'm
for a
saying,
complete
bro.
customization of your structure instead of following a predetermined design. My partner, Calvin, and I immediately set to work on building a lakeside domicile of our own. And what began as a traditional design immediately blossomed when we realized the only limitation was our imagination. You're working on every placement by hand, and thus the structural points present not only a decision, but an opportunity for expression.
I like
was
Calvin.
informed that
I hope
the
he doesn't
option of the
die.
more traditional blueprint build
I hope you guys
is
don't
still there
kill
for the
Calvin.
tourists, but I
Damn.
found
Gonna be
the
Kendrick.
construction far more appealing than the IKEA approach. Then, of course, there's the optional story to follow. From the teasers in the trailers, this is implied to be bigger and perhaps even crazier than the original, and hopefully
serious, my
continues
brother?
directly on from the forest's cliffhanger. But amongst the time spent constructing and fighting off hordes of cannibals, I didn't really get a sense of how the story was
Damn,
going
bro,
to
that's
go
a
beyond the
nasty
initial
crab.
premise. It did feel very familiar to the story of the forest though, which I guess makes sense in the term of dropping players right into the action. But I'd be
Damn.
lying if I said I didn't
God,
have
you
concerns that I
executed
could
him.
potentially retread old ground. My
Is
hope
this even
is this
allowed on
simply serves as a
YouTube?
jumping off point to go in some truly crazy directions, and it develops a narrative through line from the first game that still feels cohesive. But time will tell once I get my hands on the full game and manage to pull myself away from building a replica of the Ewok village and destroying the lives of the unsuspecting locals. Sons of the Forest appears to evolve and build on every aspect
Turtle.
of its predecessor, with a focused goal of realism and
Yeah.
developing a
Respect.
flexible ecosystem. And it feels like the building blocks are there to create something truly special. But its killer feature is the addition of impressively sophisticated and smarter AI enemies and companions that could not only provide a huge leap forward for
I
the
like that-
series, but
I
the
like that
survival
the
game
AI.
genre as a whole.
I know, it's gonna make it harder.
Horror.
You guys were gonna play on the
And
hardest
if you
mode?
like that video,
Yeah.
The hardest